Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we have a new life story. Let's begin.
I was 23 when I found out the man I loved was cheating on me. Or at least, that's what my parents told me. His name was Nathan. We were engaged. Lived in a rented townhouse in a quiet corner of Michigan. He worked in architecture. I taught literature at the local high school. We didn't have much, but we had plans. A dog, a small wedding in spring. We had a life starting to take shape. And then my mother sat me down. She said she saw a message on his phone from another woman. She said he'd been seeing her for at least 2 months. I wasn't going to say anything, she added, but you deserve the truth. She told me she'd intercepted it while visiting unexpectedly, that Nathan left his phone unlocked, that she was trying to protect me. My father backed her up, said, "We didn't raise you to accept that kind of disrespect." He didn't look at me when he said it. He just kept staring at the coffee table, like the guilt might bounce off the wood and hit him instead. I felt sick. I didn't ask to see the message. I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I went home, packed a bag, and told Nathan it was over. He asked why. I told him I knew. He looked confused, then hurt. He asked what I was talking about. I told him to stop lying. And then I left. He messaged me 22 times over the next week. I didn't respond to any of them. He showed up at my workplace once. I told the receptionist to send him away. I burned the photos, boxed the ring, cried for weeks, but always in silence, away from anyone who might ask too many questions. My mother told me I did the right thing. My father said, "Someday you'll thank us." I tried to believe that. I tried to move on. I dated other people. I switched districts. I told friends we grew apart. No one ever heard my side. And I never spoke Nathan's name again. For 14 years, I lived with the version of that story my parents gave me. Until one night, just a few months ago, everything came undone in the most ordinary way imaginable. We were sitting in my parents' kitchen. Same table, same coffee cups. My mother was 2 glasses of wine deep when she said it, almost casually. "You know, you really dodged a bullet with Nathan. He was always so devoted. Too devoted. We had to break that spell before you threw your life away." I stared at her. "What?" She laughed. "Oh, come on. You must have figured it out by now. There was no other woman." Silence. My father didn't say a word. She went on like she was talking about the weather. "You were so obsessed with him. We couldn't get through to you. You stopped visiting, stopped answering our calls, started making plans to move out of state with him. You were slipping away. We had to do something." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. 14 years. 14 years believing the man I loved had betrayed me. 14 years thinking I wasn't enough, that I was stupid for falling that deep, that I was weak for never fully healing. And it was all a lie. They lied to me. Deliberately. Strategically. Coldly. For control. For convenience. And they never thought I'd find out. They never thought I'd ask questions. They never thought I'd remember what I used to be before they broke me. They were wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to replay every moment from 14 years ago like a crime scene. Not just the breakup, everything. The weeks leading up to it, the engagement dinner, the trip we were planning to Chicago, the way Nathan smiled when he made pancakes, humming off key. How he never once, not even for a second, gave me a reason to question him. Until my mother handed me a lie, and I swallowed it whole. I thought of every man I dated since, all the first dates I ruined with my emotional walls, the second dates I canceled because something didn't feel right. I thought of the people who told me I was guarded, too cold, too independent. I thought of all the times I blamed myself for not being able to trust again. And suddenly, I hated them. Not the men, not even Nathan. I hated my parents. Not with rage, not with violence, but with something deeper. Contempt. The kind that sits in your stomach like lead. The kind you can't shake off with therapy or time. The kind you only feel toward people who looked you in the eye while setting fire to your life. By 6 a.m., I was out of bed, already searching. I didn't know if I wanted to find him or apologize or just know. Know where he ended up, know if he was okay, know if I had ruined his life the way they had ruined mine. I started with the old email he used when we lived together. Dead. No recovery option. I tried Facebook, Instagram, nothing. He wasn't the kind of person who lived online. I always loved that about him. Until now. Finally, after an hour of digging, I found a LinkedIn profile. Nathan M. Architecture. Boston. No photo. But the work history matched, the city matched, the timeline fit. I stared at that page like it held my entire past in grayscale. I clicked message, then sat frozen for 5 minutes. What was I supposed to say? Hi, Nathan. This is probably unexpected. I hope this message reaches the right person. I think we need to talk. If you're open to it, here's my number. I sent it. Then I waited. Nothing came that day. Or the next. On the third morning, my phone rang while I was brushing my teeth. Unknown number. Massachusetts area code. I froze. Answered. Emily? The voice was deeper, older, but unmistakably his. I stepped into the hallway and shut the door. Nathan, I said. Silence. I expected yelling, accusation, even a click. But all I heard was breathing. And then, what do you want? I swallowed. To tell you the truth. He didn't speak, so I did. I told him everything. How they lied, why they said they did it, what they confessed word for word. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You destroyed me." It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was just fact. I know, I said. I thought I did something. I spent years wondering what I missed, what I broke. You wouldn't even look at me. I know. He exhaled. You didn't even ask for proof. I closed my eyes. I didn't know how to doubt them. Do you know what that did to me? I didn't answer. What could I say? That I was sorry? That I suffered too? That we were both victims? None of it mattered. The damage was already done. He said, "I'm married now." I expected it. I still felt it like a blade. "She's good to me," he added. "We have a son. He's 5." I smiled, even though it stung. "I'm glad." "You needed to tell me this for you, didn't you?" "I needed you to hear it from me, not from someone else, not when it's too late." Another pause. Then he said, "It already is," and hung up. I stood in the hallway for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear as if it would change something. It didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went to the kitchen, made coffee, and stared out the window at a backyard that suddenly didn't look like mine anymore. That was the moment I realized this isn't something I'll ever get back. Not him, not that version of me, not the years I lost to a lie dressed as protection. But what I could do, what I still had time to do, was make sure they never got to do it again. Not to me. Not to anyone else.
The next time I saw my parents, I didn't warn them. I showed up unannounced on a Sunday morning. No makeup, no polite tone. I walked through their front door the same way I used to when I lived here. Only this time, I wasn't playing the good daughter. This time, I was walking into a war they didn't know they'd already lost. They were in the kitchen, like always. My father reading the paper, my mother scrolling her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Well," she said without smiling, "look who finally decided to visit." I didn't answer. I sat down across from them. "Emily?" my father asked. "Is something wrong?" I spoke to Nathan. The room froze. My mother's fingers stopped mid-scroll. My father folded his paper slowly, like buying time could undo the past. "I told him everything," I said. "Everything you did." My mother was the first to respond. "You're dredging this up after all these years? For what?" "For the truth," I said. "For myself. For him." "You broke up with him. That was your decision." "No, you manipulated me. You fed me lies and made it sound like love was weakness. And I believed you because I trusted you, because I thought you actually cared about me." "We do care," she said sharply. "We saved you." "From what?" I asked. "A man who loved me? A future you couldn't control?" My father stayed silent. "I lost 14 years of my life," I continued. "I thought I was incapable of love. I thought I was the reason everything fell apart. You watched me live in guilt and never said a word." "You've built a life," she said, voice suddenly soft, strategic. "You're strong, independent. Would you have had that with him?" I laughed once, bitterly. "That's what this was about, wasn't it? You wanted to keep me close. You couldn't handle me choosing someone else over you." My father finally spoke. "We thought we were protecting you." "You weren't," I said. "You were protecting yourselves." I stood up. "This isn't just about Nathan. This is about everything. The control, the constant judgment, the way you turn guilt into currency. I'm done with it." "Don't be dramatic," my mother scoffed. "I'm not," I said. "I'm being honest for once in my life." I took a breath and looked them both in the eye. "I'm cutting you off." My mother's face went pale. "Excuse me?" "I don't want your money. I don't want your advice.
I don't want to come for Christmas or birthdays or passive-aggressive lunches. I want my life back. And that starts by removing the people who spent years making me smaller. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Because deep down, he knew I wasn't bluffing. They watched me walk to the door, stunned into silence. And when I stepped outside, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like something that had been rotting inside me for years had finally been cut out. I didn't go home immediately. I drove around for hours. No destination, just movement. Windows down, hair whipping in the wind, music off. For the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation, not even myself. But that didn't mean I was done, because the damage my parents did wasn't just personal, it was generational. It was learned behavior. And if I didn't burn the foundation, I'd spend the rest of my life stepping over the same ruins in different forms. So I started digging. Old emails, text records, photos from the engagement party. I contacted mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I tracked down every piece of the lie they told, how they planted it, who they told, who helped them spread it. And what I found wasn't just deception, it was a pattern, one I hadn't seen before. They hadn't only done this to me, they had done it to my cousin, too. And she was ready to talk.
Her name was Kayla. We'd grown up together, cousins on my mother's side, born 2 years apart, inseparable until we weren't. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a decade, not because of any fight, just distance. That slow familial drift that happens when certain people are favored and others fall out of orbit. But when I called and told her what my parents did to me and Nathan, there was a long pause. And then she said, "They did the same thing to me." I didn't even know she had been engaged once. "They never told you?" she asked, and I could hear the bitterness in her voice. Of course they didn't. They were the ones who tore it down. Her story was similar. Different names, different details, same tactics. She met a man while living in Seattle, got engaged after a year, planned to relocate to Chicago for his job. The family, especially my mother, flipped, said he was controlling, too intense, jealous. Kayla didn't see it, so they got creative. My mother told her the fiancé had once made a joke about cheating, said he bragged about it at a barbecue when Kayla wasn't around. There was no barbecue. There were no witnesses. But the lie stuck. Her father, my mother's brother, sided with my mom. The engagement unraveled. The man moved back to Illinois. Kayla stayed, single and ashamed, thinking she had dodged a bullet. Until years later, a mutual friend told her the truth. By then, it was too late. "Do you know what it's like," she said, "to realize your life was derailed by someone who claimed they were protecting you? I've spent 10 years trying to rebuild my trust in people, in myself." I did know. Every word landed like glass. But I also felt something else. Clarity. It wasn't just about Nathan or Kayla. This was a pattern, a campaign. My mother controlled women by destroying the men they loved, always in the name of safety, always wrapped in concern. It made her look noble. It made her powerful. And it made us dependent. Not anymore. Kayla and I met in person the next week. She brought documents, old texts, printed emails, timelines. I brought mine. We spread them across our kitchen table like evidence at a trial we were preparing for. Not legal, not yet, but public, maybe. We drafted a joint letter, not angry, not vengeful, just factual. A detailed account of what had been done to us, signed by both of us with all corroborating evidence. We didn't know where we'd send it yet. Family, lawyers, even media if that came to it, but it felt good to hold it in our hands. Something tangible, something undeniable. The next step was deciding what we wanted. We didn't want apologies. We didn't want drama. We wanted consequences. We wanted them to know the game was over. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My parents were hosting their annual summer gathering, a backyard affair with catered food and smug toasts. Kayla got the invite. So did I. For the first time in years. We both RSVP'd, yes. I wore a navy dress. Kayla wore a white blouse and a steady smile. We arrived separately but made eye contact the moment we stepped into the yard. Everyone was there. Extended family, family friends, the usual performance. My mother greeted me with a smile too wide, like she couldn't quite remember if she was supposed to be mad at me or not. My father hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for coming." I nodded, then walked to the center of the patio. Kayla joined me, and we read the letter aloud. Every word, every lie, every manipulation. We told the truth without shaking. People stopped eating. Some gasped, some looked away, some just stared, mouths open, forks frozen midair. By the time we finished, my mother's face was pale. My father looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. No one clapped. No one needed to. We weren't there to entertain. We were there to end it. Kayla handed copies of the letter to every guest. I didn't make eye contact with my parents. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything that mattered. We walked out together, calm. No one followed. Later that night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and a half-dead phone buzzing with missed calls. I didn't answer any of them. The silence was enough.
The fallout started before we even made it to our cars. As Kayla and I crossed the lawn, I heard my name behind me. Sharp, cutting. "Emily," my mother snapped. "You are not leaving like this." I stopped, but didn't turn. There's nothing else to say. "You humiliated your entire family." I turned then. "No," I said. "You did. You just didn't think we'd remember." She looked like she was about to slap me. I wouldn't have been surprised. Her control had always come dressed in pearls and soft threats, but today her polish cracked. Her mouth opened and closed, her jaw working through rage she couldn't spin. My Aunt Linda, Kayla's mom, approached slowly from behind the hors d'oeuvres table, holding one of the letters in both hands, like it was smoldering. "Is it true?" she asked. Not to Kayla, to my mother. My mother scoffed. "They're exaggerating. You know how Emily's always been dramatic. And Kayla, God knows she has her own issues." Taylor stepped forward. "You told me he was aggressive, that he bragged about cheating. There was no proof because it never happened." Linda looked stunned. "You told me that too. You said you'd seen texts." "I told you what you needed to hear to get her back home," my mother hissed. "She was being reckless." And just like that, the rest of the patio quieted. The performance ended. My mother realized what she'd said. Too late. Linda's face hardened. "You lied to me. You used me to manipulate my daughter." And the ripple began. Uncle Dennis, my dad's younger brother, muttered, "Jesus Christ, I always knew something was off with that story." The tension cracked. Voices rose. I heard my cousin Mark say, "That explains why Dad stopped talking to Emily, because of a lie." Someone else, Aunt Josephine, called out, "So how much of what you've said over the years has been made up, Claire?" Claire. That's my mother's name. For a woman who built her image like a brand, graceful, selfless, protective, it must have felt like public character assassination. But it wasn't. It was exposure. They didn't throw things or scream. No one demanded blood. They just pulled away. I watched it happen in real time. People backing up, exchanging glances, murmuring to their spouses. No more side hugs, no polite smiles, just retreat. My father tried to step in. "Let's not make a scene," he said, voice firm but hollow. "This is still a family event." I looked at him. "You had 14 years to fix this. You let her speak for you." He didn't answer. Kayla and I walked to the street. Her car was parked behind mine on Windermere Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac in East Bloomfield, just outside Detroit. That's where the party was, at my parents' house. The same house I'd grown up in, the same house Nathan used to mow the lawn at to win my dad's approval. We stood beside the cars, neither of us in a rush. "That went better than I expected," Kayla said. I raised an eyebrow. "You expected worse?" She smirked. "I expected her to scream and throw the shrimp cocktail at me." We both laughed, for the first time in years. Then she said, "They're going to try to twist this, you know. They'll start calling people, playing the victim." "I know. That's why we wrote it down. That's why we gave it to everyone." "And what about you, now that it's out?" she asked. I thought about it. About Nathan, his wife, their son, the life I'd never get back. About my own life, stale and tight like clothes that never fit quite right. "Now," I said, "now I start over." Kayla hugged me hard and fast and drove off. I sat in my car for a long time after she left. The houses on Windermere Lane hadn't changed. Same manicured lawns, same old beige siding. But I felt like a stranger now, like someone who used to live in a museum of their own erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just drove. I didn't go home. I went to the place that felt like the beginning, the bookstore cafe where Nathan and I had our first real date. Willow and Finch. Still there. Still charming. On the corner of Hamilton Street and Royal Oak. Still served the lavender honey scones I used to love. I sat by the window just like we did that night. I ordered a black coffee and stared out at the people walking by, wondering how many of them were living in truths that weren't theirs. I thought of messaging Nathan again, but I didn't. Some things weren't mine to reclaim. I took out my journal instead and started writing something new. Not about the past, not about them, about what comes next. I didn't expect to hear from her, Nathan's wife. It had been 3 weeks since the confrontation at my parents' house, 2 since I stepped inside Willow and Finch, opened my journal, and began listing everything I wanted to unlearn. 1 since I blocked both my parents' numbers for the first time in my life. I was standing in the teacher's lounge, sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug, when I saw the email, sent to my school inbox. No subject line, just a name I didn't recognize at first. Claire Benton. I clicked. "Hi, Emily. You don't know me. I'm Nathan's wife. I found your message to him and I read it. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I debated whether or not to write you, but I think it's time someone told you the other half of the story. Are you open to meeting? No pressure, no expectations. Just honesty. Claire." I read it 3 times. I didn't reply right away. Part of me didn't want to reopen the wound. I had finally stopped replaying that phone call. I had gone weeks without checking his profile, without imagining the life we never built. But curiosity isn't a switch you can turn off, not when it's wrapped in someone else's truth. We met at a coffee shop in Ann Arbor, neutral ground. I chose a quiet one, not far from the university, where no one would recognize me. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands folded neatly on her lap, a half-drunk cappuccino beside her. She stood when she saw me. "Emily?" she asked, though we both already knew. I nodded. She didn't offer a handshake. We just sat. She studied me. I studied her. She was elegant, in a calm way. No heavy makeup, no flashy jewelry, just simple confidence. The kind that doesn't need to be announced. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "I wouldn't have blamed you." We were quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When I read your message, I was furious." I nodded. I get that. But not because of what you said, because of what it did to him. She looked me in the eye. He was different after you. He never talked about it, not directly, but I saw the outline of it in everything. The way he guarded himself, the way he waited for people to leave. I didn't know, I whispered. I thought he moved on. He did, she said. With me. But not fully. Not at first. She sipped her drink. After your message, he told me everything. I mean, everything. And I realized he didn't just lose you, he lost something in himself. I wish I could undo it, I said. Claire shook her head. That's not why I'm here. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. He wanted you to have this. I took it. It was his handwriting, just my name, nothing else. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. Instead, I asked, "Why did you come?" Claire exhaled. Because I don't believe in unfinished stories, and because I wanted you to know he forgave you, even if he didn't say it. I felt something shift in my chest, like a window finally opening in a sealed house. She stood. Take care of yourself, Emily. Then she left. I sat there for a long time, envelope in hand, unsure whether to open it or burn it or mail it back. Eventually, I opened it. Inside was a single page, folded once. You didn't owe me an apology. You owed yourself the truth. I hope you have it now. I don't need to hear from you again. I just wanted you to know I never stopped wishing it had gone differently. Live better than what they tried to turn you into. Nathan. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my bag. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I packed 3 boxes of things from my apartment I'd kept for the wrong reasons. Frames of family photos I no longer believed in, childhood trinkets from a home built on manipulation, a jewelry box my mother gave me after the breakup, as if she were rewarding obedience. I took it all to the alley behind my building, and I left it there. Someone else could sort through the rubble. I was done carrying it.
The legal envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon. No warning, no phone call, no "we should talk" prelude. Just a thick white envelope stamped with my parents' estate attorney's name, Goldstein and Marsh, LLP, Southfield, MI, sitting neatly on top of the day's mail. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands didn't shake. My gut didn't twist. I felt nothing. Just a kind of dead stillness I'd come to recognize as survival. Inside was a formal notice, revised will and testament of Claire and Richard Monroe. My parents. They were updating the distribution of assets, removing me as a beneficiary to the family trust. The house on Windermere Lane, the vacation condo in Traverse City, the brokerage accounts, the life insurance, all of it now divided between my younger brother Jacob and my cousin Allison, whom my mother had always treated like a second daughter. There was one sentence referencing me. Given Emily Monroe's prolonged estrangement and ongoing hostility toward the family, we have determined she is no longer aligned with the values this family represents. I laughed out loud, alone, in my apartment. Aligned with the values, I muttered. The values of deception, manipulation, control dressed as love? Good. They were right. I didn't align with them anymore. I called Kayla that evening and read her the whole letter. She was silent at first. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. "I feel nothing," I said. She paused. "Then maybe that's peace." We decided to meet again, this time at her place in Ann Arbor. I brought wine. She made pasta, and for the first time since we were teenagers, we sat at her dining room table and laughed like women who had finally stopped waiting
for permission to exist. Kayla had filed a formal complaint with her parents' lawyer to challenge how her trust had been frozen after her engagement ended. Her parents had told her it was for her own protection, that her ex was after her money. Now she wanted it reopened, reviewed, officially. "It's not about the money," she said. "It's about drawing a line. They took enough." Her courage was contagious. That night, I emailed my own attorney, Marissa Clark, a quiet bulldog of a woman who'd helped me renegotiate a lease against a shady landlord 2 years ago. I explained the situation, sent scans of the documents, gave names, dates, addresses. She replied within the hour. "Emily, I'm on it. But be warned, once we start this, there's no going back." Good. I didn't want to go back. I met with Marissa the next week. We drafted a formal contestation of the amended will, not to claim I deserved the money, but to officially put on record that I had been disinherited as retaliation, not based on any legitimate grounds. I wanted my statement there, tied to their names, forever. It wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. I was no longer their quiet mistake. I was their reckoning. A week later, I received an email from my mother. Subject: "I'm still your mother." I almost deleted it, but I opened it. "You've made your point. I don't know who you think you are dragging this family through the mud, but you're only hurting yourself. We did what we had to do. You were always emotional, always drawn to men who distracted you from your potential. You should thank us. You have a career. You're independent. We made that possible. You think you're so strong now, but when the world stops clapping for you, you'll realize you've thrown away the only people who ever truly had your back. This is your last chance to stop." I read it once, then again, and then I forwarded it to Marissa. We added it to the file. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed history to remember me correctly. Later that month, I submitted a formal statement to the private alumni newsletter of the high school where I taught. I wrote a piece about emotional manipulation in families, anonymous, but pointed. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The story spread fast. Other women reached out. Some were former students, some were strangers. Some said, "I thought I was the only one." Some said, "You gave me the words I didn't know I needed." For the first time, my life wasn't just recovery. It was resistance. I moved out of my apartment in October. It wasn't sudden. I'd been thinking about it for months, long before the letter from my mother, long before the will, long before I stood in my parents' backyard reading the truth out loud. The lease was up, the space felt stale, and I wanted a place that wasn't tied to survival. I didn't want to keep existing inside the shell of a woman who lived on defense. I wanted to start fresh, on land that wasn't borrowed from anyone's expectations. I found a 2-bedroom Craftsman in Ferndale, just north of Detroit, quiet streets, old trees, a porch that caught the evening light like it was waiting for me. It had chipped paint and a crooked mailbox, but it was mine, every inch of it. I signed the papers without asking for advice. I didn't send the listing to anyone. I just did it. The first thing I moved in was the letter Nathan's wife gave me. I framed it. Not because I wanted to stare at it every day, but because it was proof that the story didn't end where they tried to stop it. That even after all the ruin, something honest survived. I hung it in the office I was slowly turning into a writing room. Shelves, soft light, a window that faced the neighbor's cat who liked to lounge on my fence like he paid rent. I wrote in the mornings, I taught in the afternoons. I slept better than I had in years. One Saturday, Kayla came over with a bottle of wine and 2 pizzas. "You did it," she said, standing in the doorway with a grin. You built a place no one can kick you out of. We spent the night talking about everything and nothing. She had moved forward with her legal motion, and the trust she was denied after her engagement was finally being reviewed. Her parents weren't thrilled. She didn't care. "This is what healing looks like," she said, curling up on my couch with a blanket and a full glass. "It's not loud. It's not Instagram quotes. It's just doing the things they told you you'd never be able to do without them." A week later, I received an invitation in the mail. A wedding. Jacob Monroe and Allison Rains. My brother and my cousin. The same two who inherited everything when I was written out. The same two who never once called, texted, or asked if I was okay after everything came out. They'd always been close, my mother's favorites, golden children. Now they were joining forces. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I tossed it in the recycling bin. No return RSVP, no drama, no revenge. Just absence. And absence in this family was the one thing they couldn't control. The holidays came. I spent them with Kayla's friends, people I didn't owe anything to, which made their kindness feel even more real. We cooked, played board games, watched bad movies. Nobody asked why I wasn't going home. Nobody gave me pity eyes. It was just quiet joy. In January, I started a private support group online at first, then once a month in person at a bookstore cafe downtown, the Daughters Who Cut the Cord. Women came in slow waves. Teachers, nurses, a lawyer. One woman who worked as a flight attendant and only came when she was on a break between routes. They told stories, not just about betrayals, but about the quiet ways families erase you, the ways they tell you you're lucky while cutting you off from your own instincts. We weren't angry. We were rebuilding. We didn't ask for validation. We wrote our own endings. One night, after a session, I stayed behind and walked through the stacks. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, handed me a new book she thought I'd like. I took it home. It was about boundaries, the real kind, the kind that don't have to be shouted to be firm. I read it in one night. When I finished, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. "Forgiveness is not owed to the people who buried you while smiling." That was the last thing I ever wrote about them. In February, I received a certified letter from the lawyer. The estate had been settled. My name was officially removed. My parents had no further comment. Their attorney's tone was cold but careful, almost embarrassed. I signed the acknowledgement, and I never spoke to them again. Not when Jacob got married, not when Claire was hospitalized 6 months later with a minor stroke, not when Richard turned 70 and sent me a photo from the party. I didn't go, I didn't write, I didn't return fire. I just kept living. Better than they'd ever expected me to be, better than they thought I could be. Not because I needed to win, but because I finally understood that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the refusal to keep making space for the people who caused it. It was spring when I realized I had changed. Not the kind of change you announce to the world in bold declarations or Instagram captions. Not the kind that's clean or cinematic, but the kind that sneaks up on you while you're doing something ordinary, like buying fruit at the farmer's market or watching dust dance in a sunbeam. I was standing in front of a mirror at the back of a boutique in Royal Oak. I'd picked up a dress on impulse. Deep green, silky, but simple. Not my usual style, not something my mother would have approved of. Too bold, too soft, too visible. But when I put it on, I didn't hear her voice. I heard silence. And that was new. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way I stood, straighter, stiller. Like I was no longer apologizing for taking up space. I bought it. No second guessing, no "do I deserve this" loop in my head, just a swipe of a card and a quiet walk out into the early April sun. That night, I wore it while reading aloud at a small local event, a story about grief, but not the kind you cry over, the kind you carry, the kind you learn to fold into something else, the kind that leaves room for new growth if you're brave enough to leave it unburied. Afterward, a woman came up to me, young, maybe early 20s, nervous hands. She said, "You don't know me, but I read your article in the alumni newsletter months ago. The one about manipulation. It made me call my sister. We hadn't talked in years, and now we're trying again." She smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you." I don't remember what I said back, but I remember how it felt. Like something in the universe had balanced, just slightly, just enough. And I knew I was done measuring the cost of my honesty in other people's comfort. I no longer checked my parents' names in the news. I no longer looked up Nathan's Facebook profile. I no longer played mental what ifs about weddings or children or holidays. I didn't miss them. I missed who I could have been if they'd left me intact. But that version of me, the one who waited, who begged, who bent, she was gone now. And in her place stood someone else. Not fearless, but unafraid to face the fear. I painted my office walls. I adopted a dog, an awkward rescue mutt with one floppy ear and a name that didn't suit him. So I renamed him Leo, after the constellation. I took long walks without headphones. I dated a man who wasn't intimidated by my silence or my scars. When it ended, I didn't fall apart. I just breathed and kept moving. By summer, the Daughters Who Cut the Cord had grown to over 300 members. Some met online, others formed city-based pods. We didn't give advice. We didn't push reconciliation. We just listened, witnessed, held each other through the burning and the rebuilding. One night, someone in the group asked, "How do you know when you're healed?" The room was quiet. Then I said, "When the story stops being a cage and becomes a key." That's what this was now. A key. Not something to drag behind me like a chain of grief, but something to open what was closed for too long. Doors to truth, to self-trust, to peace that wasn't borrowed or begged for. One evening in August, I walked past Windermere Lane again. I hadn't meant to. I was in the area for a meeting, and habit pulled me toward it like a tide. I stopped at the edge of the cul-de-sac. The house looked the same. Same shutters, same fence. But I didn't go closer. Didn't stare. Didn't ache. I just stood there for a moment. Then I whispered, "Goodbye." Not to them, but to the version of me that used to live behind that door. And I turned, and I left. And this time, I never looked back.